We're from Point, which is Oldham's Parent Carer Forum. So I'm Andrew Robinson, I'm the chair of that forum, and I've been in that role now for 4.5 years, and came into this arena on the back of the fact that I have a son who's now 15 with autism and complex difficulties. And to my side here is Caroline Whitworth, who's now following being our compliments and complaints officer, the latter of which we don't get many, but obviously is now assuming the role of interim vice chair whilst that role is vacant within the restructure. So we've been asked to come along today and really talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing to build capacity locally in Oldham, because I guess we approached this from a slightly different position in that we were actually a pathfinder local authority. So for 2 years we have been bashing doors down and making sure that co-production does happen locally. And I guess we're in quite a fortunate position now where that's working quite well. I wouldn't say anybody's mastered it, and you constantly have to go back to the drawing table sometimes. But on the back of the success that we've had, one of the key challenges we are then facing is the capacity to have people there to co-produce because of the extensive work that's now taking place following the reform's implementation. So, a little bit of background to us, obviously established in 2010, but just to put some context on our growth, we started off with 45 members back then. We currently have a database membership of 650, but we're actively engaged through social media and reaching over 2,000 families and individuals per week through that mechanism, through LinkedIn, through Facebook, and through a proactive website that we try our very best to make sure is as up to date as we can be when things change on a regular basis. So we are obviously quite a well-developed forum in terms of the length of time that we're going, but we're really not happy with where we are. So that's against, those numbers are against a backdrop of 1,200 local statements, 200 learning disability assessments as was that were existent in Oldham. So we are really conscious that we've still got a job to do to attract people. And that's kind of led us on a bit of a journey really to look at how we restructure. And one of the things that we decided to do, we've been looking at a variety of different ways that we can structure ourselves, including becoming a charity. But for us, we decided that what we wanted to do was go down the community interest company route, because we felt as an organisation that would give us a bit more flexibility and it kind of fitted the bill around how we saw ourselves developing in the future. So what we very quickly needed to do is look at the structure. So we were a committee that started off as 4 people who started the forum and became a committee of 12 within the first year, all taking on an active role and fulfilling different parts of the committee's agenda really, I guess. But under the terms of a community interest company, what's really clear to us is you have to have a board, and that board is actually a board of directors. So along with that comes a lot more accountability, and not everybody within our forum wanted to take that level of responsibility. So we've had to think very carefully about how we can keep the existing people who don't want that level of responsibility, but build a robust structure going forward that gives us enough capacity and enough numbers to really kind of engage around the table, because the one thing that we're passionate about is if we're invited to do something, we want to be there, and saying no is our biggest frustration really, and we do kind of kick ourselves when we're in that position. So hence, we've kind of, what was the committee has become a board, and this gives you an example of some of the roles that obviously form within that board and that accountability structure. So as we talked about, kind of sitting underneath that now so that we don't lose that capacity and we don't lose those parent skills and that really valuable resource of people who don't want to be at that level, we now have steering groups that feed into that board. And what we decided we wanted to do was to have boards that looked at finance to really give that accountability, particularly around budgets and grants and that information, to give that amount of challenge and make sure that the finance, limited as it may be, that is coming into the forums is actually used to the best and to build that capacity and to make sure that parents and carers are really informed, particularly at the minute with all the changes that are happening. We have a service development division, because one of the things that we have done through our co-production and through a really great working relationship now locally is, in March of this year as a forum, we've actually had to set up a slightly different side to us, which is a service division, because our local authority have actually now commissioned us as the provider of what was Parent Partnership Service and is now Oldham Send Information Advice and Support Service. So it really means that, the passion is coming through now, the commitment's there and the trust, to the extent that parents are now delivering that service. This is no longer a service that sits within the local authority council offices. We've also got a parent and young person's voice, because we really want to make sure that that is our strength. That is what we're all about as a forum, and that is the crucial elements to everything that we do, whether it's through the service side of things or whether it's through the forum, to make sure that parent-carer voices are absolutely driving those decisions and driving that co-production agenda. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline now, because Caroline's going to explain the new parts of our structure.
So as Andrew was saying, one of the reasons that we decided to set up a little bit of a different structure was because of the missed opportunities. We felt as a board of 12, or a committee of 12, we just weren't having enough fingers in as many pies as we possibly could. So as a result, we came up with what we're calling point champions. The way that we were structuring this was through our local council wards. So we grouped together our council wards in which people would vote with a particular volunteer, 2 or 3 volunteers that live within that ward, that would have links to their local councillor within that ward in order to raise anything from parents and carers, and ultimately to be the voice of that particular area. If you live in a particular council ward within Oldham, you very often have the opportunity to know the schools in those areas. You'll meet those parents in the park and have those informal conversations when you're walking through Tesco's that you might not necessarily get on a day-to-day basis as a committee or board member. So what we decided to do was look at giving back to those volunteers that would give up that time. So as Andrew said, when you sit on a board, you might not necessarily want to spend as much time making those decisions. So another way to engage parent-carer voice was to have point champions set aside time for themselves as a little cohort to decide on how they wanted to get into different schools, parents' evenings, any local GP services that weren't necessarily having a voice, and understand that point is representative of those little communities. For instance, in Oldham we have a black and ethnic minority population that we weren't currently engaging as well as we could have, and that by having these wards we would have people in those areas gauging those voices at a local level. What else we wanted to do within the chairs was to build on people's skills. So there may be people that might not necessarily want to sit on the board but still have skills and time to give. So in order to give back to those, we have come up with an induction and training programme for those volunteers that will carry them through and that will develop as they develop, and that we can target the training for those particular areas that they need. So we did this. We had trialled in the past 6 months to try and find one of the key board members, which was our secretary, through word of mouth, through our Sunday sessions that we hold at the moment at the local community centre. And unfortunately that hadn't sort of brought anybody to the table that really wanted to fulfil that space as a secretary. So we decided to approach it in a little bit of a different way. We held 2 recruitment events, both at times and venues for parents and carers to access. One after work in the evening and one at our popular Sunday session. And we did find that the interest that this created was actually above and beyond what we'd ever hoped for, really. We specified that we needed particular skills, we specified that we needed particular roles, but also we opened the doors to other people that might necessarily have approached us as a volunteer. I think Andrew will agree, when we're in the community, people will see us as point, but not necessarily know how to get involved with anything that we're doing at the moment, or not necessarily know what we're involved in at a local level. And it gave them an opportunity to have a listen of what they might want to get involved in. So as a result of our recruitment event, we found that both events were really well attended. We had massive success. We found that on our Sunday sessions, which we are there on a weekly basis, was more successful than the evening event, possibly because we're there every week. People want to approach us on that basis, but also because it allows the children and young people to come to those sessions as well. So it frees up the parent and carer to come and speak to us at an event like this. As you can see, it sort of says we had 7 new parent carers volunteered. Actually now that's 8 since we've done this slide this week, and we've got 4 expressions of interest that we do need to follow up. So ultimately we've gone from a board of 12 and doubled our figures in a matter of 2 events over the same week, which is an astounding success for us, really. What we were hoping as well is that somebody would come forward for secretary. Not only did we have 1 offer, but we had 2 offers for that position that we've been trying to recruit for the past 6 months just through word of mouth. So we found that tool and emailing out to across to all our members, including professionals that were on our mailing list, because we had one parent come forward from a professional recommendation to volunteer for us. So we found that was a massive success. So moving forward, we're looking to go through the induction and training process for those volunteers. We're hoping that beyond this recruitment, once we've got our little forums within each council ward, that more people get to know about what our Point Forum is about, and ultimately join as members and potentially want to sit on various steering groups that we're in at the moment as part of our SEND reforms, and also within our steering groups and eventually on our board, depending as our membership to our board is fluid.